Anderson heaving one down the sideline, and he's got Cass Allen over the top. Big side, down the sideline. Touchdown. His signature move and his signature performance. Allen, big ball one more time. 58 yards this time.
You're listening to the Bruin Bible. This is your host, Will Decker, bringing you UCLA football content all throughout the year for LA Football Network.
What is up, LAFB fans? Will Decker, your host from the Bruin Bible, and draft is in session. We are here to talk about Bet Online and the good people behind the brand. Football season is officially back, and Bet Online remains your number one source for all your football betting needs this season. You'll find the latest odds, matchup info, player needs, and game trends. And as your continued source for all sports wagering info, BetOnline features live betting, free contests, live scores, and giveaways all season long. Always the fastest and easiest way to bet all of your favorite sports and events like MLB, MMA, tennis, boxing, and even golf. Head to betonline.ag to join and receive your 100% welcome bonus with your first deposit. Make sure to use promo code LAFB to receive your rewards. BetOnline, where the game starts. What is up, and welcome to the latest edition of the Bruin Bible. We have the man himself in the house, my guy Chris Karpman from Sun Devil Source. He came on last year to preview the Sun Devils. He's out in Arizona right now covering the Devils as we speak, a team that is, kind of getting some resurgence with this new quarterback going on that we'll get into. Chris, first and foremost, how are you doing your day, man?
I'm good, Will. How are you doing?
Doing awesome. And kind of the way I like to start these podcasts is, especially with a guest like yourself, I like to kind of just make it easy, make it fun. Have you been binge watching anything of late TV show wise, Chris? Busy season for college football, but what have you been watching TV wise when it comes to what you and the wife are watching?
Yeah, so unfortunately, I'm not really binging anything at the moment. I did watch, Ozark. I watched Stranger Things. I tend to stock up kind of during the season because we're so busy with football, right? And then usually there'll be like 2 or 3 shows that I just like voraciously knock out by the time that January rolls around. So I'm listening to a lot of the reviews of what people are saying about some of the shows out there, and then I'll be sort of calculated about which shows I pick up. But my favorite all-time shows, I think probably like a lot of people, it's like The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, The Wire, I thought was amazing. So, yeah.
Dude, you're hitting all of my wheelhouses. Those are like 3 of my 4 Mount Rushmore up there. Game of Thrones is the one I think is the other one for me. I'm like you. I've stocked up. I'm waiting for just like a quiet weekend when I could watch House of Dragon. But football season has just been too crazy going on. Speaking of craziness, ASU has kind of had just a lot of things going on there. Herm Edwards fired on the field after the, Eastern Michigan game. And the head coaching candidates that have been linked here, just rumor-wise, obviously, Kenny Dillingham is the name that comes to mind when I've seen some of these articles. But maybe Matt Rule's in play now after he leaves the Carolina Panthers, maybe Urban Meyer. Chris, in your opinion, who has the best chance of maybe coming to ASU, and who are some of the names you're hearing that could be the man in charge for the Sun Devils moving forward?
Yeah, I don't really know who the odds would say are the most likely candidates. I think everybody's talking about Dillingham because Dillingham really wants the job. He's an ASU alum who's from the Valley. He has connections with the Boosters, and he's obviously a young and hungry, passionate type of a guy. So he checks a lot of boxes in terms of like how he might be able to connect with kids and the understanding, because he was a graduate assistant under Todd Graham for a couple years early on when the Sun Devils were pretty successful, along with Dan Lanning and some other people that have gone on to be successful. Memphis's head coach and others. So I personally feel like they're going to want to hire somebody who's been a head coach, though, if they can. You look at Brent Brennan, Troy Taylor. Maybe if they have the ability to swing for the fences, and they could somehow convince Jonathan Smith at Oregon State, I think that would be like a home run. Not saying that they have that ability, but I think that's something that would make a lot of sense. He's somebody who's from Southern California and understands the lay of the land, and Oregon State probably does have a lower ceiling than Arizona State does within the conference. I thought Justin Wilcox had made a lot of sense, but Cal's obviously struggling this year, right? And then there's other coordinators that would definitely leap at the opportunity, like an Alex Grinch at USC. I think Brian Lindgren is going to become a head coach at Oregon State OC, who's doing a really good job under Jonathan Smith. Then there's a prominent sort of national names that everybody talks a lot about, Paul Chris or Deion Sanders or whatever. I don't really tend to think that any of them are really likely. I've heard that Urban Meyer is almost definitely not going to happen due to concerns about his background and some of the challenges that ASU is facing right now with the NCAA investigation and some of the public perception around kind of Herm Edwards and all that. So I really don't know. I'm just trying to, get a sense of what they might be looking for and who would service those criteria. I think that because the move with Herm Edwards happened so early, like some of these others around college football, there's not a lot of action that's going to happen probably until like the second half of November, and then it'll like start to really heat up quite a bit.
Yeah, and none of us know, but it's always great to hear from the insider himself to see what's going on with the Sun Devils. The Jonathan Smith comment, I had not even thought about that, but coming into the season, just the way he's built up Oregon State, that would be a clear home run if they are able to secure him. But on the other side, I'm a Scottsdale, Arizona kid. I work for the LA Football Network now. I'm out in LA. Kenny Dillingham was our offensive coordinator when we were freshmen in high school at Chaparral High School. That's where he went to school. So a part of me wants my old coach Kenny to come back and be the coach for ASU. I think that would be such a cool story with him, just a full circle moment, an AZ kid back coaching the Sun Devils. So that's a really fun storyline to watch out for moving forward. Let's take it to the offense. Let's break it down what ASU is bringing to the table. And they may have found their quarterback moving forward in a guy that, took the college world by storm last week, Trent Bourguet. And the first time we saw him this season was against Washington, 3 touchdowns, an interception coming off the bench. He was doing phenomenal stuff. Looks like ASU has officially moved to him. And, granted, it was a very, weak Colorado opponent, if you will. But just look at the numbers, the 430 yards of passing, the 3 touchdowns he was able to get vertical again. It's allowing the ASU offense to be at their peak with the talent they have around him. And Bourguet has been so special, in the limited times we've seen from him. Chris, I've been following some of the things that you've been writing where the tight end room is officially opening up with Bourguet. And, I've heard even the comments about the flag football, is making him, allowing him to dissect blitzes better than just about any other quarterback that ASU's had in recent memory. What is it with Bourguet, and what is he doing right to succeed for ASU in just these limited amount of opportunities that we've seen from him?
Yeah, I thought the flag football thing was kind of funny because everyone plays flag football, right? And yet some quarterbacks are better than others at feeling pressure, understanding where it might be coming from, when and why and how, and what they need to do with the football. And Bourguet is very cerebral, smart student of the game, somebody who spent a lot of time in understanding defensive schemes and hot route concepts and all these things that I think a lot of other guys who play flag football aren't very good at, right? So I think he's trying to give a nice little shout out to his Tucson Turf team, which was really great in 7-on-7. They won some big championships and whatnot from being from a smaller part of Arizona. But look, he is somebody who does a great job at getting the ball out of his hands quickly to his playmakers. What ASU was earlier this season was so conservative and heavily reliant on its run game with Xavier Valladay and handing the ball off and having huddles and fewer plays per drive and fewer drives per game, that it was like, okay, we're going to just try to keep the game, shrink the game down, keep it tight. Our defense not feeling so good about it. We're going to allow ourselves to kind of be in there late and give ourselves a chance. but it was actually the misuse of their personnel, I would say, because they weren't taking advantage of the tight end capability. They went out and they got transfers besides Swinson, Jalen Conyers, both of them via the portal from the Big 12. And they weren't taking advantage of Elijah Badger and some of their wide receivers, Geo Sanders, to the degree that they probably could have, right? And I don't think they were using their quarterback mobility properly with Emory Jones. We've seen that in the Pac-12 at times over the years, that you try to make a dual threat guy or a guy who's better improvisationally be a pocket conformed quarterback. And that doesn't usually work all that well. And so what happened was Sean Aguano decided he'd seen enough after ASU had a bad offensive outing against Stanford, lost the game 15-14, Stanford didn't even score a touchdown, still managed to win. And so he said, look, I want to be more aggressive. That's sort of the thing that I want to change from what we were under Herm Edwards, who was an ultra conservative, both sides of the ball, defense and run game travel, he always liked to say. And so they started to go to more empty sets. They started to get the ball out of his hand more quickly on a lot of their RPO and quick game concepts. Be able to understand, okay, teams are going to try to bring extra safety down into the box, try to take away our run game with Valladay. So what do we have to do to be able to counteract that, right? We have to be able to get our tight end on the seam. We have to be able to take advantage of opportunities to throw the go ball outside the numbers to Elijah Badger or Brian Thompson or Andre Johnson. We have to be able to allow ourselves to stretch out the field, the full width of the field, and use the verticality of the field. This is something that Chip Kelly has been a master at for a lot of years at UCLA, and understanding, okay, how can we make them play 11 on 11 and stress every single defender and generate mismatches and take advantage of whatever personnel weaknesses that an opponent has. ASU wasn't doing that previously, but under Aguano, they did against Colorado. But as you said there, Will, which is a very important point, a terrible defense. And also Bourguet came in off the bench when Emory Jones got hurt against Washington, and they had two freshmen in their secondary, and they were really reeling and didn't play well. So he has had the opportunity to play against really bad secondaries and or defenses overall. And now he's going to go up against a much tougher challenge against UCLA. Not one that is impenetrable or anything like that, but it's not going to be anywhere near as easy as I think it was for him in his first two starts. Still like what the job that he's done. I think he's a pretty good quarterback. Maybe even should have been starting earlier in the season. Definitely, I think should have replaced Emory Jones earlier in that game against Stanford.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And just watching the tape on him, it's just impressive, some of the downfield shots he's taking that just the offense was not capable of. And to kind of credit you, you said those other two secondaries were banged up. Colorado, obviously not a very good team. And, the likes of Washington, they were missing some guys. Anyone that's followed the Chip Kelly era should know that, the secondary has been kind of the weakest point of the team, even this year when they're a top 15 team and 12th right now in the college football playoff ranking. But if you are going to beat us, the secondary is the place to go. I mean, we saw it with Bo Nix a couple weekends ago, kind of just attacking the defense vertically, in different areas. And what scares me is we've only got a game and a half of tape on Bourguet. So, from a defensive coordinator standpoint, they're trying to figure out tendencies and where this guy can go. A lack of tape, we've seen it sometimes with these rookie quarterbacks, whether it's the NFL or, freshman year of college. Jaden Daniels is a perfect example. That year one, we're thinking this guy is going to be one of the best quarterbacks in the Pac-12, and he has, built a nice, successful career. But years 2 and 3 were a little bit of a disappointment, I would say, amongst people that followed ASU and the coverage of that. So with the lack of tape on Bourguet, the ability to extend the play, get the offense moving in a different way than it has earlier in the season, you kind of have to throw out the tape as a whole and just kind of come in and prepare in a different way. So for me as a UCLA fan and someone that covers the team, I think this is a trap game for the program. They've got to come out and get on their P's and Q's with a guy like Bourguet and what he's able to do with the football in his hands. And Chris, you touched upon the last guy, Xavier Valladay, the running back for Arizona State. And I don't think this guy's getting enough credit nationally for what he's been able to do throughout his college career. Was a transfer from Wyoming down to Arizona State, was a 2-time 1,000-yard rusher at Wyoming. It would have been a 3-time had it not been the pandemic shortened season. He's doing incredible stuff. Double-digit touchdowns on the ground, 760 yards rushing, 5.5 yards per carry. And yeah, he might be overshadowed by the likes of, a Travis Dye, who's been at the Oregons and USC's, and Charbonnet, our guy at UCLA. But I think Valladay, when all is said and done, this guy is going to be either on the Pac-12 second or third team, to finish the year. Valladay's been awesome. How has he kind of stabilized your run game for ASU this year, Chris?
Well, yeah, ASU's actually had a very good rushing attack for years now. Benjamin transitioning to Rashad White. Sean Aguanu was coaching running backs before he got elevated to the interim job. So he went out and got Valladay, who was, as you said, there the top Mountain West rusher for several years. He's a 4,000-yard career rusher now, and the active leader in Division I football in that regard. So, or at least at the FBS level. So I feel like I think he's leading the Pac-12 in carries. I think he's like 4th or 5th overall in rushing yards. So that he's going to be a big factor. He's had like 300 or 400-yard games this season, including last week. You have to be able to account for him. He's going to keep defenses very honest, and like you said, well, I think it's a very good point. The historical tendency is, okay, here's what we know the ASU is going to do on certain downs and distances. Well, then they play against Colorado, and it's very different. They're throwing the ball a lot more on first down. They're more successful in what they're doing differently on second downs. They're now all of a sudden they're playing with tempo, and so you kind of have to throw out the whole here's our game plan built upon what this team has done in all these down and distance personnel grouping situations this year and or in recent years. And that makes it tougher for sure to prepare for the Bruins, but you definitely know that Valladay is going to be one of the guys who has the ball in his hands the most. Nevertheless, I think they have also moved toward trying to throw the ball to him a little bit more in recent weeks. He's had a wheel route touchdown. He's had a couple other big receptions that you have to kind of account for. That can be difficult, college football, man coverage, get a linebacker on an athlete, all of that. So, and then Daniel Ngata, he didn't really have much of an impact last week, but he is over 5 yards a carry and has had a couple games where he's had some big runs coming off the bench and backing up Valladay. So they definitely have a pretty good run game capability. The one thing I will say is that Ladarius Henderson, their starting left guard, got hurt a few weeks ago, and he hasn't played since because he has a broken hand. And ASU's not been able to get the same sort of push at the point of attack in some of their run game concepts, which I think has contributed to not moving the football as well as they wanted to against Stanford in particular, and maybe not running the ball as much as they otherwise would have or could have against Colorado. I mean, he's not going to play in this game. I don't think he did practice this week. So that means Des Holmes will continue to play guard. He's more of a tackle. And Chris Martinez, the San Diego State transfer, who'd been a right guard, he's been a left guard. So that could be another sort of lingering thing this week, because ASU is going to probably need to score a lot of points to keep pace with the Bruins.
Yeah, and this is, an offense that UCLA has been able to move the ball down the field. And who knows, with the new quarterback change, the new scheming of Aguano, I think ASU can be in the top half of the Pac-12 moving forward for the rest of the season. I want to talk about the receiving room. You kind of touched on the tight ends earlier. Elijah Badger was a 4-star recruit coming into ASU. And it's kind of taken him a while to get on his feet, but this year we've kind of really seen it, play out for him. He had a huge game against Colorado last week, the 130 in yards and receiving. Badger's got to be the number one receiver. Talk about Badger and maybe some other, weapons you guys have in the receiving room when it comes for Bourget.
Well, Badger's, I think, the most improved probably receiver in the Pac-12 this year. He was a guy who was explosive and capable of scoring a touchdown every time he touched the ball last year, but he played so few snaps because they didn't have trust in his ability to execute his assignments. So that kept him off the field like 80% of the downs offensively. And he's really ramped up his ability to kind of see and process and understand kind of what he's doing on a play-to-play basis, execute his assignment. And the talent's always been there. I actually, coming out of high school, I compared him to Brandon Ayuk athletically very similar size, stature, the ability to run after the catch and get a lot of yards by just going through the heart of a defense. He had like one play where he had like 6 or 7 broken tackles against Colorado last week. That was extremely impressive. I think right now he's in the top 5 of receptions and yards per game in the Pac-12. And if anything, they probably weren't getting the ball to him early enough because they were trying to sort of see what his capability would be. And then they've been scaling him up since then. So he set career highs against Stanford, and then he broke that against Colorado. And now it's like, okay, well, this guy's capable of being targeted 10 times a game, and you're probably going to end up having somebody who can have 100 yards through the air most of the time. And they also, last year he had 2 end-around touchdowns. This year he didn't even get, or jet sweeps. This year he didn't get any until last week against Colorado, had a jet sweep for a good gain. And everyone's like, okay, well, where was that previously? So when you have what the capability of Validate, then you have what Badger can do, because you can also hit him over the top. He had the incredible catch that was ruled to be out of bounds. His foot was on the line. That would have been maybe a game winner against Stanford had the ball been placed inside a little bit more. He just has a different gear. And then Geo Sanders is sort of that reliable slot guy who's a little bit of an underrated athlete and can move the chains and get you some yardage in some tough spots. And he's made contested catches as well in some third down situations. And then on the perimeter opposite Badger, they have Brian Thompson, who he's had a slow start to this season and been, not as good as I think that he probably should have been, but he has had some games now of late where he sort of got in gear, and he provides that sort of balanced ability to beat you deep or run a broader route tree that gets you some intermediate opportunities. Andre Johnson is a great blocker, one of the best probably in the country, actually, and he's been playing more and better of late. So they really have, those are the kind of their top 4 wideouts. Obviously, we talked about the running backs, and then the tight end capability in the passing game has really started to show itself.
Yeah, and you mentioned Brian Thompson, only 19 catches, but he's averaging 16.7 yards a catch. So he is really making the most of those targets that are coming his way. Let's pivot to the defensive side of the ball. Merlin Robertson's still there. Kyle Soley's still there. These are veteran names within the Pac-12 that are still with the Devils making plays. Soley's a Scottsdale kid. I know he went to Saguaro, 91 tackles so far this year, 2 picks. He kind of strikes me as the general of the defense, and he's playing like it. Give me your thoughts on what Kyle Soley means to this defense.
Yeah, until last week, he was second in the country in FBS in tackles per game, on pace to lead the Pac-12 in tackles. ASU hasn't had somebody do that since Christian Sam in 2017, who was a very talented linebacker. And Soley's also a team captain, local guy, 6th-year senior, lunch pail type, right? He shows up every day, very even with his effort, watches film, the example that you kind of want to have in your program. And Merlin Robertson was the more talented of the two of them, but somebody who didn't have as much consistency with some of those habits earlier, which I think led to him stalling out after a super freshman season where he was like a freshman All-American, right? But he's playing his best ball, I would say, of the last few years now as well. And they've had some issues with their run defense overall, but I think that's had a lot to do with some injuries and some shaky play at the point of attack relative to kind of what they expected they'd be able to do in that regard, more so than any sort of major flaws that you have with Kyle Soley and Merlin Robertson. Now, I don't want to make it seem like those guys are otherworldly, because they're not. They're just like good, solid Pac-12 linebackers who are very experienced and they're going to do their jobs. But there's a significant drop-off between them and then anyone else who plays at the position in ASU's scheme, which is primarily going to be a nickel against the 11 personnel groupings that UCLA is going to put on the field.
Absolutely. And, it doesn't hurt to have those experienced veterans at the position, and they're making defenses pay just by being solid Pac 12 linebackers, like you mentioned. If there is a weak spot in the defense for Arizona State where UCLA's offense can capitalize, coming into this game, in your opinion, where would that be? I know you mentioned the run defense. Is the pass rush limited? Is the secondary, kind of similar to UCLA's where that's a weak point? What's the weak point for you when it comes to ASU's defense?
Well, actually, I think that it has to do with their approach to how they've been playing. They, until Stanford, they were extremely predictable. They were going to rush four. They were almost never going to blitz. They were going to play a ton of cover three and cover four zone coverages. And that's okay if you do that extremely successfully. The problem is that they were predictable, but they also weren't good enough from an execution standpoint. And then what that did was that enabled opposing offensive coordinators and quarterbacks to be very comfortable in what the call should be against their scheme, what they were likely to face on any given down and distance, and the ability to get the ball out. Because when you're not getting to the quarterback with four, and you kind of know where everybody else on the field is going to be, you have the ability to beat those zones, especially. And the types, I also think that this is really important, the types of players that they added, especially via transfer, like they added Ro Torrance, who's a corner, 6'2", 215 pounds, Tark Luckett, 6'2", 210 pounds. They have bigger defensive backs that they recruited who are more apt to be man coverage guys that you play at the line of scrimmage and you try to delay routes and use your length to be disruptive. But what they did was they instead played more conservatively with cushions on the perimeter, and that's not the best way to utilize those players. What they've done recently is Donnie Henderson started to bring more pressure against Stanford and against Colorado on first downs, on third and longs, and they've had more pass breakups, like in 2 games, than they had the first 6 games of the season, really. And part of that I think is Stanford's bigger receivers, and they're not as athletically capable of getting breaking free of defensive backs, and Colorado's they're just not that good overall. So that was part of it. But I think the style was limiting and too predictable, and they've made some adjustments. They definitely, without a question, have had a very mediocre run defense. They were hurt by, like I said, some injuries. Michael Matus got hurt early in the season. He was, before the season started, he was going to be probably their best defensive end. Omar Norman Lott was going to be one of their best defensive tackles. He got knocked out, and they've had other subsequent injuries. So they've had to sort of use some duct tape and super glue to try to kind of get it together some weeks. But I just think that they're now starting to get a better sense of who they probably should be. And then from there, it's rejiggering to be able to execute within what they should be doing, which it has a little bit of a learning curve as well.
Yeah, and Arizona State's run defense ranked 77th in the country. Chris, before I let you go, man, I got to get the prediction for Saturday's game and the best bar to go to on Mill Avenue for our UCLA fans traveling to the desert, my alma mater.
Yeah, so I don't get to Mill too often anymore. I know everybody kind of goes to Casa, which is like the probably the spot that you want to at least check out. My advice, because there's different, obviously there's I always see there's a range of different ages and types of people. You want to basically just walk right down from the stadium. It's Rio Salado, basically, and Stadium Way. They both kind of dump right into Mill. And then you got about 4 blocks there between 5th and like 8th Streets, and that's kind of where you want to kind of peruse to see what kind of catches your fancy. So, and there'll be lots of people out there. Casa is probably the place that most people are going to be at. My prediction for the game is a lot of points, and I don't think that ASU is going to win, but I think ASU will make it a very respectable game. And but the defense is just not good enough right now, given what UCLA brings to the fold. And so something like maybe 44-38 or 44-30, 41 or something like that is kind of what I think it's going to be.
Yeah, man. And you nailed it with both Casa, because that was my go-to when I was at ASU. And the prediction, I got 48-35. I think it's going to be like 21-17 or, 24-21 at halftime. ASU's creeping up. Chip will scheme something, in the second half, maybe to get them going. But ASU rebuilding right now. But if Bourguet is as good as we think he can be, ASU is going to be back in a short time. Chris, just want to thank you so much for coming on, dude. This was a lot of fun. Bruin Bible, we are officially